weird. But yeah, man, I think we're rolling, dude. I'm very happy you're here.
Thank you, man. I'm
Yeah,
happy
man.
to be back. You know, this is like, I guess officially the third one we've done now. So
Yeah, if you include the one with Michael, yeah, third.
yeah, which is like the big co-op one, and then we had our first one when that would actually been when we like first actually met. Probably 2-3 years ago, right?
Yeah, like 6 months after we met.
Yeah.
Before the first, or before the 5 Cent City.
Yeah, exactly.
Gee,
Yeah, leading up to it. So
I think why as well, one of the primary reasons was, and I told you this, that more people need to hear what you have to say. I was telling Pat about this morning. More people need to hear what you say and how you say things and your viewpoints on stuff. You're a very smart guy, very articulate guy.
thank you.
Yeah,
I
dude.
try sometimes, you know?
Dude, it shows. It
Sometimes
does show.
I don't though.
It does show. Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Yeah, dude, of course. I stand by it. But I think, yeah, so that's why I was like, I had him on already recently. But it was with Michael, and I was like, we weren't able to focus on like you and viewpoints of yours that I want to expand on that are kind of paired in a time frame and stuff like that. So welcome back, man. That's the Vision Quest today.
Yeah, because you asked me to come back. I was like, oh, dude, of course, anytime. I was like, I don't know what you want to talk about, but like, that's I don't know what I'm doing different, but like, let's go for it.
I kind of like seeing how the direction it takes too. After I'm like, yeah, man, I'll have somebody on who I talk to every couple weeks, every week, and see what happens. So, yeah, man, you
turns out to be shit. You just don't post it.
Yeah,
You just...
I'll just give you a couple clips that are nice little bites, and that's about it. And they'll be like, "Where's the full episode?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, you don't want to see the beginning, middle, or the end." I want to know how long ago did you decide to leave the personal training world?
Would have been about 6 months ago now, and that's more on the side of like general public or Gen Pop.
Makes sense. Yeah. Classes
I
and
still
stuff.
train our higher level athletes at the gymnastics club, but in terms of the lift your weights Susan type of stuff, that's been about 6 months. Yeah. But I think like mentally, I think I checked out probably a little bit longer than 6 months ago. But
fair enough.
Yeah.
Do you what was kind of the driving force for the it could be both two questions, both the checking out part and then the actual like business side of like I'm checking out of this and like switching gears to put all my focus into gymnastics.
So good way to ask, because there really were two main factors or kind of main events, I would say, that kind of led to the decision being made.
Oh, awesome.
So the one on the business aspect of things was just, if I was looking at things purely as a business owner, it was a really bad business deal for me, like on myself. I was putting a lot of time and a lot of effort. And when I say checked out mentally, like, just to be clear, I was still doing everything I could for my clients, and I was still showing up every day for my clients. It's not like I was just like fluffing it or kind of checking it in or just kind of like, going through it and kind of going through the motions. Like, there was still a lot of effort and passion that went into it. It was just, there was a good chunk of time where it just didn't feel right.
Okay.
Right, where it just didn't feel like that love for it wasn't there. And so financially a big one was I had all these other programs with young kids that was expanding and doing so well, and I was getting to train athletes from at a level that I had never been able to train before, which as a trainer is also obviously very satisfying, because you get to, when you get to see that what you're doing is working for the people that you're working for, there's also a huge benefit in that. Not that it wasn't working on the other spectrum of things for some of the adults or some of the general population people that I was working for at all. Like, some of those people have incredible stories that I feel very privileged to have been able to be a part of. Just working with athletes it's just a different game, right? And there's a much more objective measurement of like, you were able to do this, and now athletically you can do this. There's a clear progress that's happened, right? So it's still very rewarding in that sense, as a trainer, and especially when you get to start training people that are doing things that you didn't think you would ever get the chance to train. It's again very rewarding. So I had all these programs that financially were bringing in a lot more revenue, but I was still putting in a full-time job's worth of hours into another service that realistically was actually costing me money.
Okay.
So I was working and I was
Yeah.
training for a lot of the general pop stuff that I was doing because of the amount of hours that I was having to take out of my day as an entrepreneur and as a a high-level athletic coach.
Oh, for
The
sure,
time that I
yeah.
was putting into the general population stuff and the amount of money that I was able to actually realistically charge, I was operating that side of my business at a loss.
Right.
So from a business standpoint, I was doing it because I loved the people I was doing it for, but it wasn't because I was making a profit off of it. I was actually paying out of pocket for it the majority
No
of the
kidding.
time, right? So again, as a business model, not a great business model,
Yeah.
but again, I loved the work
Yeah.
and I loved the people that I was doing it for, which is the reason it took a while for me to, even though some of that love for that aspect of the job kind of started to fizzle away a little bit. And I shouldn't even say it fizzled away. There was more of like a calling for something different.
Right.
I don't even want to say greater because I still feel very proud of the work that I was doing with
Yeah.
a lot of the clients that I was working with. It just didn't ever feel like there was something I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do forever. Right?
yeah,
This is
that
like,
makes
if I
sense.
could do this, if I could feel this feeling with these clients for the rest of my life, I would be a happy man for the rest of
Yeah.
my life. That feeling wasn't there.
Ah.
It just didn't feel like this is the thing that I want to
Right.
live for forever, right? There was a lot of rewards in it, but it wasn't the thing that really felt right. So
Right.
then to do that and then also be financially kind of just supporting it out of pocket
Yeah.
or supporting it through the other business ventures that I was doing, it just didn't really make sense,
Right.
right? So then it got to a point where it was, for me also, I had to kind of make the realization that even if I close up shop, I have to trust that what I've been able to teach the people that I was working with, that I will no longer be able to work with, have learned enough that they will be able to go on and still be able to be successful and succeed and stay healthy. Because if I don't feel as though they could move on and make good choices or good decisions without my constant supervision, then I haven't really done a very good job as a trainer.
No.
If I don't think that you can do it without me.
Right.
Right? So there was also that aspect where there was a bit of ego where it's like I had to kind of check myself where they shouldn't need me. And I don't think that they do absolutely need me. I think I love spending time with them and I love being able to help them. And I think that there was a genuine relationship in the opposite direction too. I think a lot of the clients or hopefully a lot of the clients that I worked with
Well,
did
sure,
feel
yeah.
very good coming to see me. But I had to make the realization that I'm not necessary for their success.
Ah.
Right?
Interesting.
And I can just be proud of the work that I have done with them and still be able to trust that they'll move on and do great things
Yeah.
without me.
Like that's enough.
And
You
that,
steer them in the right
and that
direction.
I can also do great things without depending on them coming to see me for 40 hours a week to make me feel like I'm a good trainer. Right.
Right.
So there was other ways for me to be able to feel fulfilled and feel successful without getting that validation from people being like, oh man, you're great. We love your class. We love this. We love that. Right. Which was great and
Yeah.
awesome. But again, if it just doesn't feel right, it didn't feel like that was the thing that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I had to check the ego for that and be like, well,
Yeah.
they probably don't need that for the rest of their lives either. Right.
Yeah. Was that difficult to do?
Oh, fuck yeah, man. Because for me, I got into athletics purely out of insecurity. Like everything
Right.
I did athletically was just because it was like, oh, you're too short. Okay, start running and jumping higher.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that was the start of my training. It was like, oh, you're a small dude, learn how to fight.
Right.
Like everything I
100%,
did
yeah.
athletically was originally stemmed from some form of insecurity when I was younger.
Yeah.
That was just, you feel like this is a way to kind of fix it or work on it, right? And then you start
Yeah.
doing it, and then you start getting rewarded for it, and it's like, oh, you're getting good at this. It's like, oh, that feels nice.
Oh, we got some.
Tell me I jump higher.
You're
again,
getting
right?
that
Yeah, it's like,
external
tell me I'm
validation,
jumping
yeah.
high, or tell me I have good kicks. Like, tell right, and now it starts to feel good because the thing that I used to
Yeah.
feel really insecure about is like now something I'm being praised for. I'm
Right.
being told is good, and then after that, you go to school, you put all this time and effort into an education, because it's like, well, that's what you're supposed to do. Is you're supposed
Yeah.
to go to school and find a job that you're going to work for the rest of your life, right? Like that's what you're told. Like I graduated,
Allegedly, yeah.
I graduated high school. I was 16. Anything I wanted to know, I still don't know what I want to do for the rest of my life. I didn't know at 16,
Yeah.
right? It just didn't happen. So it was like, okay, go to school. Well, I like gym class, so I guess I'll take gym class in fucking university and college.
Yeah.
And then you do that, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, if you took these classes, you're supposed to work in this field now. Okay, cool. Let's go work in that field. So from the time I was like 12 or 13 and started working out in a gym or started training, I've been doing sports since I was even younger, but in terms of actually seriously training, like working out, I started when I was like 12 or 13. So from the point of 12 or 13 all the way to 24, 25 when I finished post-secondary, all I've been known as is the guy who works out.
Right.
And now I'm getting into a career where I'm now known as the guy who gives good workout advice. And I'm the guy who can help people that maybe other people couldn't help because he does things differently or he knows shit that other people don't know. Right. It's not that I knew things other people didn't know. I think I had a unique way of combining the information that I did have, which I do feel I was pretty good at, and it helped some people, right? Mm-hmm. But since the time I was 12, I was just like the athletic guy.
Yeah.
I was the athletic guy who was good at rehabbing people, good at training people, was a good athlete, but never really did anything that was like super athletic in terms of accomplishments.
Yeah.
Like, I was never like state champion of this, but
like
I was a super athletic dude.
Type
right?
stuff,
And like, we've talked about it, it's like you could throw me into any kind of sport and I could learn it really quick.
You'll pick it up really quick no matter what it is.
And if it's something that I wanted to get better at, I knew how to work my ass off and how to train to get as good at it as fast as I possibly could, right? So that's all I was known for, was like the dude who's good at, who's a good athlete. I was known as like, a lot of people would just always kind of, they'd be like, oh, you're the most like athletic guy that I know. And I'm like, I don't even fucking really do anything.
I don't feed anything.
Like, I feel like a CrossFitter. I'm just training for training right now. Like, I'm not, there's no real sport going on here. It's like,
get your digs while you can,
just kidding, But yeah, that's a lot of what it was, right? It was like, it got to a point where I was just training for the sake of training. I wasn't training for any specific sport or activity. I was just doing it because that's what I knew. Right. And I, obviously still love the process of improving and getting better. Like, I don't think I'll ever wake up one day and be like, you know what? I'm strong enough. I never want to do a pull-up again in my life. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. No. Like, I love the feeling of feeling strong and being able to be confident in your body and being able to feel that your body can take on whatever challenges you might want to do. That's not going to go away.
No.
But yeah, up until the point like 6 months ago when I stopped taking on clients, that was what I was known for. Yeah. That was the only thing I was known for, right?
How long were you personal training people for?
I started taking on clients like officially. I think I was like 23 or 24 when I was like officially working as a personal trainer. But I had been coaching sports and I had been coaching martial arts. I've been coaching
about a decade.
Volleyball, basketball. I've
Roughly.
been all of that since probably 13, 14.
Okay.
So I had already been, let's say, coaching for about 10 years by the time I started my business. I had been coaching gymnastics at that point for 5 or 6 years. Then I started personal training, and I did that for about 6 years before I retired as a personal trainer.
In that time, do you have any success stories that stand out to you? That's like your favorite ones?
Like from clients?
Yeah, that you've worked with. That you mentioned a few that you got to like see. And I got to see where, so I'm curious.
Yeah, I would have
one
quite a few
stand out.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite stories of a client of mine is I managed to like shame him out of smoking.
No
which
way.
Is like probably one of the biggest W's you could have. So he would come in, and when he started training with me, he was a bit more overweight and kind of just your typical kind of like blue collar guy, like just worked a hard physical job. Came in, he would pull up in the work truck, and essentially at the time I was up on the second floor, so I would always be able to, there was a lot of windows, I would always be able to see my clients pull into the parking lot before they actually got upstairs and then got into the gym. So I'd be either training or I'd be with another client, and I would see him pull up, and there was always like a really long gap between when I would see him walk out of the vehicle and when he would pop up, and the door was right there. Like it was parking lot, door, staircase, there was the gym.
You're not going far.
It's a 30-second trip.
Yeah.
But I would see him walk from walk out of his car and then basically just disappear for 10 minutes, and then he'd pop up. So eventually what I started doing is I would just like roll the window open, and I'd kind of like stick my head out to see what he was doing, and I would see he'd be like smoking outside. So he would walk from his car, he'd get out after, probably a rough work day, get out of the truck, he'd pull up, light a smoke, and then he'd walk up to the gym. So basically, I just started, like, every time he would get out of his truck and start smoking at the corner, I would just start opening the window, stick my head out, and just stare at him and yell at him and tell him how much I was going to make him do cardio for smoking, right? And I was doing it, like, as a joke, but then he would come up and I'd be like, oh, okay, well, like, that's not great for your lungs, so we'll see how this goes today. So then I
Yeah.
would make him do some kind of like circuit training where I would be doing like cardiovascular work with him. And it got to the point where the workouts became so fucking miserable when I would catch him smoking that he just stopped smoking before the gym. And then eventually that led to him
Stop.
not smoking. And it is to this day probably like my most successful bullying story, you know? And I did it. And here's the thing, and this is why
That's
I think
awesome.
like in some contexts bullying is acceptable, but it's only acceptable if you're bullying the person because you genuinely want them to feel better and you know that what they're doing is
Right.
destructive.
Your,
all right?
your intent is huge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The intent was to bully you out of something that could kill you, and for that I feel proud. So that was a dope story.
That's both awesome and horrible.
Yeah.
all at once.
I still don't feel bad about it at all. Not a single regret. But
I'm
and yeah,
sure
I
he
had a
has
lot
one
of clients
either,
with
yeah.
just. I think one of my favorite things, like just, even just ego wise, is there was no better feeling. Of, because I was a trainer,
Mm-hmm.
I was never a physio. I was not a registered kinesiologist. I
Right.
was not a chiro or a massage therapist or
There's
whatever.
no fancy
There's-
letter.
I
combo
had
next to your
no
name.
fancy degree or diploma that I hung
Right.
up on my wall and told people that I got to they could pay with their fucking insurances or they could pay with their benefits, right? I was never
Crazy.
that guy. But because of that, I was also very often overlooked by a lot of people that maybe had those kinds of degrees or that, that education.
Yeah. Tough.
And there was no better feeling than when I would have a client who would have some kind of injury or have some kind of problem. They would go see the person with the big fancy letters on their name,
Yeah.
and they would come back after like 3-4 months and still feel like absolute shit. But now they feel like shit and they lost $600. And then they would finally ask me for my opinion on something, and I would show them something, or I would give them some form of a treatment or some kind of a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they would do it, they would come back like a week or two later and be like, I feel fucking incredible.
Yeah.
And, you cost me a lot less than $600. And then, so
This works.
immediately it was like, wow, that feels really good. And then the second thought I had was always, I should charge more. Right? But yeah, so that was always a good feeling. And there were a lot of times where I had a lot of clients that over time I kind of ended up becoming like their first go-to. Whereas at the start of my career, it
amazing.
was, when I first started, it was the opposite.
Yeah.
I was like the last. It was.
Yeah.
They got desperate, so they came to see the gym guy.
Yeah, the
right?
no
'Cause
letter guy.
This didn't work. I'm
Yeah.
still injured. This isn't feeling good. This is hurting. Blah blah blah. Whatever. I still can't work out. I can't do this. Then I've tried everything. I would hear that all the time. Oh, I've tried everything. I went to see my doctor. They put me on this
course
med,
they
or I
did,
went to
right?
go see this physio. They put me on a TENS machine, or I went to see this, and I'd be like, okay, that's great. Let's try this. And then I would get them to do some stuff, and
Yeah.
after about 30 minutes, I'm like, oh, okay, that actually feels a little bit better. It's not as painful. Like, okay, great. I want you to do this, and I would give them some kind of prescription of movements or breath work or some form of like, quote unquote rehabilitation exercise,
Yeah.
or just slowly reintroducing certain movements into their day. And then they would come see me a week later and be like, my shoulder hasn't felt like this, or my knee hasn't felt like this in fucking years. And I'd be like, yeah,
Yeah.
probably should have came to see me the first time. And then the next time that something would happen, or if
Yeah.
they did start, let's say they tweak their back, fucking doing whatever,
Yeah.
instead of being like the last person that they would come see, they would come see me first. And then a lot of times what was funny was like, oh, okay, well, remember that thing I made you do? And they're like, yeah. I was like, yeah, did you stop doing that? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why the problem came back. And then it was like,
okay.
damn, you're right. All right. Okay, we'll get back to it. Perfect, right?
that's
So that was
amazing,
really
yeah.
dope. And I had a lot of good stories where I got to build really nice relationships with clients. And the trust that I had with certain clients was incredible. And I'm still extremely grateful for that. And, and hopefully they remember the stuff that
I'm
we
sure.
did together and how
sure.
I was able to help, because at the end of the day, like, the goal for me was always to give somebody else the tools that they needed to take care of themselves,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Teach them how to fish.
Exactly, because otherwise it's just, you're just coming to see me and I'm just basically slapping a Band-Aid on it, and I'm not actually really helping or fixing the problem, right? And some of the most challenging clients I would have would be clients that didn't want to do the shit that I was recommending that they would do.
Yeah.
Because then the problem goes deeper, and kind of like we talked about, is like, are you coming to see me because you want a solution? Or are you coming to see me because you want me to know that you're suffering?
Yeah, you
Because
want
there's a
somebody
big
to listen.
difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want somebody to listen, and you want somebody to know that you're still struggling.
Right.
And that's fine, but it gets to a point where if I'm genuinely trying to help you, and I genuinely want you to feel better, I want you to physically heal this physical thing that, from my understanding, I think you have the ability to do so through maybe some just more disciplined work. Well, if I really want you to do that, sometimes I might have to risk really insulting you. Not because I'm saying anything insulting, but because I might have to have a difficult conversation with you about why you aren't doing the things
Truth hurts, pal.
that you know you should be doing, right? And then the conversation would go into a lot deeper territory than just, this is your rehab work.
Right.
Or how come you're not doing your exercises? It would turn into a conversation of like, okay, well, what is the feeling that you're having that this isn't even worth doing?
Yeah.
Or do you have a reason as to why you even want to feel better?
Oh, right.
Because if you don't have that, then I could scream at you every day
Yeah.
and give you every exercise on the planet. I could do 10 more hours of research on the type of injury that you have, but if you, for some reason, don't even feel like there's a point in doing it, or there's nothing to feel better for, it doesn't matter what I'm telling you, you're not going to do it.
Right.
Right?
No,
And then
sense.
if that's the case, then I'm not the right person for you. Because if your intention is to just come in and have me spend 30 minutes showing you the same exercise I've showed you 6 times over, knowing that you're just going to leave and go home and not do them for another week until you come see me again, then this probably isn't going to work very well. Right? So, and I think that by taking that risk sometimes, I think it actually helped a lot of people, because then we were able to, get to a realization that maybe the problem wasn't that you didn't have the right therapist or the right physio, or you didn't have the right chiro treatment, or you didn't have, maybe the problem is like something maybe a little bit deeper. And then we got to figure out why it is that you're kind of putting this limit on yourself in the first place, or why you feel like it's not even worthwhile to chase after this goal, right? Then that's when I would build what I would like to think is relationships that'll probably last a lifetime, because there's a much deeper thing than just like, oh, he gave me a good stretch. It's like, cool, great.
They trusted you enough to be vulnerable with that, and then you managed to keep that as it went, right? So it only builds, I think.
Yeah, and that's a tough one, right? Like, people being vulnerable with you in any sense, especially with physical, because I found, like, as a trainer, the big thing too is a lot of people would come see me because they were feeling hurt, like they were injured,
right?
Or a lot of people would come see me because they felt insecure.
Tough one,
And that's a tough one, because for anybody to trust someone, and the other thing too is I had just demographic wise, the majority of my clients were younger to middle-aged women.
Right.
So to come see a younger dude at the time when I started, 25, to come see a younger guy
for sure,
and be vulnerable about maybe the way you look, or maybe something physically, or maybe you're not feeling well in your body, or whether it's because of an injury, or maybe, like you gained weight after pregnancy, or maybe whatever happened, is like, that's a really, really vulnerable place for people to be in.
Yeah.
So you can't go into it and just start, or for me, it was like, I never felt right just going into it and like yelling at people to fucking do more burpees, or you know what I mean? Like, that just didn't feel right. You had to build some kind of emotional relationship with the client if I wanted them to really listen and pay attention, or to try to change. Because if I couldn't build a connection with them, there was no fucking way they would trust me.
No.
Right?
You're right.
So,
interesting.
Yeah. Working through that was actually probably one of my favorite things. Is I got to learn a lot about people. Because the more I learned about people and how people function, or how people think, or patterns that people get into, it made me where even if I didn't have the best information for them to work off of, if I was able to reach them on a more personal level than another, let's say, professional would have managed to be able to do it, I found that a lot of the things that I was able to provide them were much more effective.
Right.
Because now they believed in it, or there was a way for them to feel like they could be safe with it, and be honest about whether they were feeling better or feeling worse, or why they felt that certain things might not be working for them, instead of just, having no emotional connection to the person you're working with, and then just bouncing around from place to place until you find an answer that you like to hear or sounds good to you. Stick to that for 6 months to a year before you realize, like, oh, that didn't work either. Okay, bounce around. That's
right? A tough one.
So I was very thankful for a lot of those. I mean, every client that I really worked with, because it was always a challenge to try to figure out, like, what's the thing that's really driving this person, or what's the thing that's actually preventing this person from really getting to where they want to be. So that was a really dope part of the job.
How do you how did you manage to develop that skill set in the beginning? Like, did you always have that? Were you just like, Because it seems like you have to be able to give a little before you can get a little.
Yeah,
Like you can't
yeah.
just expect them to come in and trust. Like, because it seems like that was the difference between
Yeah.
you and a lot of other
Trust
places.
was definitely a huge thing.
Like, was it you just took the time to kind of understand, or like what was? How did you even approach that?
I think a big part of it for me is you can't understand how other people think and feel if you don't first understand how you think and feel, right? So I think there was a lot of time spent on really just trying to understand my motivations behind things, or maybe where I've made mistakes before, or where I've made, or where certain insecurities might have come from, or where certain motivations might come from. And the more I got to kind of understand about myself,
Right.
it made it a lot easier for me to be empathetic with somebody that maybe on the surface level I couldn't really relate to.
Oh, okay.
But then when I could figure out or have some kind of connection with like emotionally how that person felt,
Yeah.
knowing how I've felt in those situations before, or in a similar situation, or having a similar emotion,
Yeah.
it made it easier for me to kind of approach the situation where I could be blunt and I could be honest with the person,
Right.
without, with minimizing the risk that I would offend them to the point where they wouldn't want to come back.
Okay, that makes
Right?
sense. Yeah.
So it's always like a hard balance of, okay, well, I've been in this kind of, that kind of headspace before, and if somebody would have said this to me, that might have really helped, but if they would have said it in this way, that probably would have scared me off. So then it would give me kind of like a
okay.
better idea of how I might want to approach that conversation with that other person, right? And don't get me wrong, like,
Interesting, yeah.
there's a lot of failure in that too, and I'm sure,
Sure.
there's a lot of people that I probably didn't manage to reach,
Yeah.
or didn't manage to reach in time for before they would leave or find to try something else.
Yes.
But over time, it's definitely a skill I got a lot better at.
Sick.
And I think that one thing that for me worked is the more I understood where a lot of my qualities were, like good qualities were, that made it even easier for me to relate to people.
Oh,
Because
okay, that
now
makes sense.
being able to relate to people on completely different levels, where I'm not just the gym guy now.
Yeah.
So I not only can I relate to somebody who has an injury, because it's like, oh, I've been injured too, so this is how I dealt with the injury. It's like that's a very physical level.
Yeah.
And if you're somebody who's only physical, if that's the only way you can relate,
Right.
that's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Being somebody who also did, let's say, a lot of work in like the mental health field, or did a lot of volunteer work in the mental health field, well, that gave me an advantage if I was talking to a client who was maybe struggling in that aspect. It gave me a different way that I could try to approach and get to that person to make them feel safe or secure, so that we could actually really start to make progress, right? So yeah, having those skills and being able to be like, oh shit, this is actually something I'm half decent at.
Yeah.
I'm not great. I'm probably not an expert, but it's probably rare for somebody to go to a gym and be able to find a trainer who has experience in all these different things,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
and then also has
Yeah.
maybe a couple exercises or maybe a couple movements that might be able to help you out physically at the same time.
Oh,
So then
sick.
I could get to the person through some kind of movement, and,
Yeah.
and people are always way more open and vulnerable when they're tired. So it's like I could work somebody out and get them
Sure, yeah.
to be exhausted, and they'd be like, oh, okay, I feel good. And then their guard would kind of be down, and then I was able to build some kind of trust with them,
Right.
where then we could actually get into some of the deeper shit that might be causing them grief. Right? So yeah, that was probably a big part of the approach.
It sounds, and I know this a bit from firsthand, but not to the depth of what you've been through and what you've gone through and what you're going through with or what you've gone through with clients and stuff like that in your space. But it sounds, and it is exhausting.
Yeah.
Connecting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
can only
yeah.
imagine, like from your side of it too. Like I don't know how you manage to deal with that, or if you're just selective, or because I can see. I remember you expressing often how drained you were.
Yeah.
Certain times, and I couldn't quite. I understood it, but I definitely didn't understand the magnitude of what it was. Because like I've dealt with kids at outdoor centers
Yeah.
and like young adults and doing this, that, and the other thing, but I was able to have a bit more breaks than kind of what you did. And then dealing with people in the public is just it's own battle. But I don't have to deal with them directly.
Yeah.
Like I just
Yeah.
deal with the things
It's a
that they're
different
building. Yeah. So, how did you manage to kind of not let it get to you?
I would say it did.
Yeah.
And I think a part of why I also kind of had to leave, and why some of that love and that passion for it kind of faded away, was probably the same reason that I was able to reach a lot of clients and be able to be successful with a lot of clients, also ended up being the reason why I ended up having to leave.
Right.
Is the more I realized about myself, and the more I realized that, like, I wanted to do more than just help people on a physical level.
Yeah.
Right? I found that I was like, well, I kind of ended up shoehorning myself into this role of, like, only being known as the guy who is a physical aid. Right? And then for me to make that realization was like, oh man, like, I kind of want to do more than just help people physically. And sometimes it's like, it's not even necessarily that I want to just help people mentally. It's like, there's other things that I'm interested in doing.
Oh, hell yeah.
And I've put so much time and effort, and I've taken on so much of other people's emotions or stress or strain at times where that just, it took over my entire life, because every day was just wake up and, okay, how can I try to fix this person's problems?
Right.
How can I fix this person's body? How can I help this person with the issue that they're having? And then, you know, from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m., that's all you do is worry about other people's shit. And then it was like 10 o'clock at night, and then you wonder why you can't sleep. And it's like, oh yeah, because I just spent all day worried about what other people were doing and how they were going to do and how they could, or what I could do to help them overcome, whether it's a physical, emotional, or even just a hard time in their life.
Yeah.
And then it gets to the end of the day, and you're like I haven't spent a minute thinking about what I even wanted to do.
No,
right?
100%,
Like,
yeah.
it wasn't even like a work addiction.
No.
I think it presented like that for sure, but I think a lot of it became a dependency on my end where I only felt like I was being useful or I was good at something if I was able to provide some form of help to somebody else, right? And that definitely just became, it became like an addiction to that feeling of like, oh, I feel a little bit better because I got to help this person, but then at the end of the night, I still feel like I haven't really accomplished anything. Like my own goals or my own needs, I haven't done anything for them.
Right.
Right? I've done very little for them.
Did you always have a, like, just a bunch of things that came up through, like, in your head that you were like, man, I really wish I could do this, I really wish I could do that? Or were you seeing people do things that interested you, or were you...
Well, it was kind of a mix, right? Like, because when I started really working all the time, and like I started coaching gymnastics when I was about 18.
Yeah.
But at that point I was 18, so I was still like just getting into first year university. So like those first 18 to 20, I was just like any other university kid, right? I was fucking going out and partying whenever I could, and I'd go to the gym, but I was going to the gym mostly just because it was, you know, you wanted to look good for girls, and like that was the only real, because I wasn't really doing sports anymore. I wasn't playing volleyball, I wasn't playing basketball, so I was like, okay, I'll just lift some weights because girls like biceps, right? They don't, but that's the idea, right?
Well,
guys like them more.
Guys
than
like girls like them. Guys love them.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so that became. That's like, all right, we're just gonna do this now.
So long story short, we only do chin-ups.
Exactly. Purely palms in, you know, like just that's all.
Is that supinated?
It's supinated. Yeah, you got it. But yeah, but then at 20, when I ended up losing my mom, and then I very quickly ended up moving out of my house for a lot of reasons. It was just mentally, like, it was really hard for me to be in the same house that I found her in.
Oh, I can only
right.
imagine.
So. And there was a lot of other things going on at the time, and I moved out of my place. So I was living in a small little one-bedroom apartment. I was living there with my girlfriend. She didn't really work she didn't have a full-time job either, so we were both kind of just working part-time, basically just trying to survive. So from the time that my mom passed away, I kind of just took on this role of like, I needed to take care of everyone.
Right.
I needed to take care of my girlfriend. I needed to make sure that, you know, all our bills were paid and that we had food. And then if my family wasn't doing well, like, they could never see me be upset or sad about what had happened. I always had to be like the strong one in the family, where, you know, and the fucked up part is I would get rewarded for that, because people would tell me like, oh, you're so strong. Oh, you're handling this so well. So I'm being told that I'm handling shit really well. Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm just like diving further and further into just like grind, work, no social life other than caretaking for the people, like the immediate people close to me, right? And then do that all throughout post-secondary. Then you're done post-secondary. Now it's going into the workforce, and now I'm getting paid to help other people and take care of their problems.
Yeah, it's never about you.
So it was like from the time I was 20,
Ah.
I was always constantly obsessed and trying to distract myself by making my problems to fix everybody else's shit. Whether I had no idea what I was doing,
Yeah.
I would try to do whatever I could to kind of help. And
Right.
a lot of times just end up making shit worse for people because I probably shouldn't have been helping in certain aspects, or I really wasn't in authority in certain things.
Yeah.
But that just became my life. So like that's all I was. I thought of myself as like I'm just the guy who helps other people get through their shit. And then when somebody asks me what's wrong with you or why
Yeah.
you're tired, I'm like, I have no idea. It must be because I worked long hours. And I was like, no, I haven't done anything for most of like
Yeah.
I've still never taken a day off.
Yeah.
I've still never gone on a trip or gone somewhere I thought was nice or
Soon. I know you
or
will.
like went to an event that
It's
I
gonna
was really
happen.
excited for. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that wasn't a thing. Like I didn't do that from the time my mom passed away until still. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it just became this constant grind of like make sure I'm there to help anybody who might have an issue, no matter how big, small.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be not only there to help them with the issue, but I have
Yeah.
to be fucking good at helping it.
Now, I wonder, do you think that, does that stem from maybe how you felt at the time when your mom passed and you're like, now I don't want anybody else to experience something
Oh,
like this, or like some form of
100%, man.
like, hey, I
Yeah.
feel like I felt so bad in this time, now I don't want anybody else to feel what she felt.
Huge.
Maybe, or even,
Absolutely.
what you felt at all. Because that's crazy. I found out,
So-
by the way, the other day when I brought this up to my mom about her being my teacher.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I brought it up to mom. She's like, "Holy shit!" And I was like, "Yeah, man." She's like, "I was at that funeral." I was
Really?
Like, no way. She has like the little
Damn. There
piece
you go.
for me,
Yeah,
I
man.
was
Like
"Word."
my mom's funeral
anyways, yeah.
was huge. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
I've still never seen that many people in one place. It was a lineup around
Awesome
the
and
block.
sad.
Yeah. And the fucked up part was I had a lot of resentment and bitterness after that because I had all these people, and again, I was 20 at the time, so
That's how it goes. Yeah.
you know, emotional maturity not exactly all there. I had all these people coming in, and I was like, "Who the fuck are you guys?" Like literally, it was like I was angry because I was like,
Yeah.
"Why are all these people here now?" But when she's been sick for the past 6 months, no one was around. Like that was, which again, not at all fair.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
it's like not the right way of thinking. But at the time, that's how I felt. I was like, "Oh yeah, great!" Like
Yeah.
I'm so proud we packed a funeral. Like where the fuck were you guys when she was telling you guys
Yeah.
she was tired from work or she was
200
telling you she
people in
needed
the
help with
hall,
it? Like
yeah.
nobody was answering the phone then, but now all of a sudden it was like so that's how it felt at the time. But then the other thing is I got really mad and angry at my mom because for a good chunk of my childhood, like my mom was how could I say? She was involved in everything I did, but it never really felt like she was a part of it.
Oh.
Right? So
Interesting.
my mom would pick me up from my practice, but it was always late because she was always working late.
Oh,
You know what I mean? Like
that makes sense.
my mom would always be, she would help me with homework, but only after she helped all the kids at her dance studio. It was stuff like that, right? Where throughout my whole life, to me,
Oh,
it always
interesting.
ended up feeling like,
you
and
were-
again, which is not, it's not the reality, but
No.
as a child, that was my perception of it. Was it always seemed like I was the last thing on the to-do list.
Oh,
So
yeah.
by the time things got to like what I wanted or what I needed from my mom, it came off as just like she was tired, she was bitchy, she was miserable,
Yeah.
nothing was ever good enough. Like so I had a really hard time. Like me and my mom did not get along for a good part of
Right.
my childhood. Like not that we were like constantly fighting, but I didn't feel close to her.
No,
at
I
all,
felt a bit resented.
right?
Perhaps.
Yeah, for sure. And then she passes away, and then I have hundreds of people that I've never met before
Yeah.
in my entire life bawling their eyes out about how amazing of a person she is.
Yeah.
And I'm standing there and I'm like, who the fuck did you guys know?
Yeah.
Because that's not who she was to me.
That's crazy.
Or at least at the time, it's not who
Yeah.
I saw her as.
Right.
I didn't
But
see
perception
her.
is reality.
Exactly.
right?
I didn't
It's
see her as
crazy.
this like incredible human who was doing
Yeah.
all these amazing things to help people. I was like, she's always mad at me. She's always telling me I'm not allowed to do things.
Yeah.
She's constantly like hiding me. Like I'm not allowed to do anything. I'm just there to basically it was like you have to do your work, you do your sports, and then you go home and like I stayed in my room and fucking hid away because I didn't. I was constantly walking on eggshells. That's
Yeah,
how it
for
felt.
sure.
And then like she passed away, and everyone's fucking praising her for being this incredible human. And I was like, man, I don't know the person you're talking about.
No.
That's not who I knew my mom to be.
Right.
It is who she was,
For sure. Yeah.
but it's not how I perceived her at the time, right? So then she passes away,
Yeah.
and now it's like, okay, well, that stung like a motherfucker, and I still don't know why.
Yeah.
But I know I'm, it was like, I didn't want to admit that I was devastated because I didn't really understand why I was devastated about losing my mom.
Mm-hmm.
But I had all this anger and resentment towards other people and towards her because I was like, why are you so great for everybody else? And my memories of you are being like this like strict, harsh, just like constantly bitter, miserable person at home.
Yeah.
That's who I felt she was, right? As a kid.
Yeah.
And yeah, so then the rest of my life was like, okay, well, I don't want anyone to have to suffer that.
Right.
So I'm going to make sure that anyone around me, no one ever is going to feel bad around me. Ever.
Yeah.
I'm going to make sure everyone around me feels fantastic. And if there's a problem, I'm going to fucking fix it. But then on top of that, it was like, I also learned how to handle my emotions from the most emotionally unstable woman that I fucking knew at the time, right? So without realizing it is, I ended up becoming essentially the same thing that my mom was becoming, and that ultimately ended up killing her. Right? My mom was the person who was constantly giving everything to everybody else. Except herself. Yeah. And then there I am fucking 10 years later realizing like I'm literally the same fucking thing. And it wasn't until...
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it was absolutely terrifying. And that's when, you got to be a huge part of it at the last 5 Cent City that we did. And I did my performance. And the reason that came about was... And I should probably post that thing at some point because it's
bro.
I've never. It's
totally
not at all on the internet.
Totally forgot.
Like, I've never actually put that up. So maybe one day I'll put that up. But
bugs me. That's my issue, not yours.
Yeah,
it's
our issue. Yeah. It's our issue.
Me problem. Super problem.
But yeah, with that, essentially, for 10 years, I'd never cried about my mom passing away.
Right.
Ever, because I was like, and she was, whatever. It was like, I didn't have that kind of connection with her, right? I thought.
Yeah.
It was stupid. That was a stupid thing. It was definitely, that was like what I had convinced myself, right? Yeah. And then we're like, okay, we're going to put on this thing for 5 Cent City. And then I get asked like, hey, well, would you do a performance for your mom? And then we start kind of snowballing ideas. I'm like, oh, okay, well, what would be really cool is, I was like, I got these old VHS tapes of her when she was a dance teacher, dancing and singing. So it was like, we could do a performance where like I could show that. I'll show some old clips of my mom from like back in the day. Cool. It'd be nostalgic, and then I would go and I could do like a little speech on, the things I learned from her, growing from that experience. Yeah. Which again, at the time, I still hadn't really fully kind of gotten over. I just kind of convinced myself, and I got so busy helping other people that I just kind of pretended like it wasn't really a thing that ever bothered me, right? Yeah. And then we start going through these tapes, and the tapes were from 1991, which is the year before I was born, all the way to 1999. And I started watching them at 1999 because I figured I'll have the best, clearest footage in 1999 because as you go back in years, older cameras, older tech, probably won't look as good. It'll be scratchy or kind of won't look as clean, right? I didn't find any fucking footage of my mom. From 1999 all the way to I think that it was 94 was the first time I think there was an actual clip of her on stage. So for like 5 years of her running this entire dance program, she wasn't on stage. And then 94 was like, oh, she came on and did like a song at the end where she just kind of like did a little two-step. And I was like, oh, that's her. Okay, cool. So we have like some footage. Go to 93, she was on stage singing. And actually doing a performance. Yeah. 92, she's on stage and she's actually doing like the whole finale with her crew. With like the belly, right? Like me in her stomach. Like so it was like, oh, this is fucking dope. Like she's like she used to do this shit. And then I get to the tape of 1991, which was technically the first tape, but it was the last one that I had access to. So it was the last tape that I was gonna watch. All the footage, or sorry, not all, but 90% of the footage that was used for that 5 Cent City performance was taken from that 1991 tape. Wow. And it was footage of her backstage. It was footage of her singing, footage of her dancing, footage of her on stage performing.
Epic, yeah.
And that's when it kind of like, when I watched them and I was like, oh, dope, I finally have footage that I can use for this fucking, this 5 Cent City performance that we could put together. I finally have something that's worthwhile putting together, right? And then I was, sitting there and I was talking with our good friends, Mark and Christian, and we were going through it and then it hit me. I was like, my mom was a teacher who taught young kids, had her own space, was doing something or trying to do something totally different in the city. I was like, oh fuck, like that sounds a little familiar. It's like, I was like, oh shit, like, fuck, I guess I'm kind of doing the same shit.
Do I know somebody who does that?
Right? Yeah, it's like that sounds awfully familiar. And then it was
wild.
That was wild, but then it was realizing that every year that my mom was less involved and showed less of herself, either backstage or even on stage performing, as the years would go on, is when she got more and more sick. Right? And I truly believe that it was that way. It wasn't that she was feeling bad, so she got off stage. She got off stage and started feeling bad. And for me to realize that, like, she, from 1991, where she was fully present and involved in everything and on stage and doing what she loved doing, because she was a dancer. That's what she did for up until that point in her life. That's what she was. She was just a dancer and a singer. So she was 100% a performer. And she would put on these incredible shows. And then the more that she removed herself from the actual performance part of it, it was like the worse that she would feel. So it's like, for me as a child growing up, my mom being like tired and bitter and kind of never seemed to be in a good mood and super picky, and I could never seem to make her happy. It was like, when I thought of that, but then I go backwards on these tapes, I was like, oh, she was actually a fucking incredibly happy person in 1991 and in 1992 and 93, which was nice, because like, okay, I didn't come along and then ruin shit, so that was good. Nice to know. Right? But you look at these tapes and it was, I was like, oh fuck, like, my mom did the same shit that I'm doing now, which is she made everybody else's problems her priority, started doing less and less of the things that she loved doing, started being less and less involved with the people she really loved being around, and started giving everything she had to not just her career as a dance teacher, but then she started a career as a teacher, then a career as a vice principal, then a career as a principal. So it was like, the further down this other route that she went, the worse her mental health got. And then the stronger my memories of having this like mean bitchy mom became more prevalent, right? And then it was like, oh shit, I am my mom. It was like, damn it. And then that was absolutely terrifying.
Oh my goodness.
Because making the realization that I am literally, through every effort of mine to not end up being like my mom, everything that I've done to try to not end up like that, I'm actually doing the exact same shit that led her to her death of committing suicide, which was like literally making everybody else's shit a priority. And just numbing herself, and basically just every year it was like a little bit less of her. So it was like, it makes sense that like the memory I had of her was of this like sad, angry person, but then I look at these tapes and she's fucking smiling and like vibrant. Like you could just, you looked at her and it was like, she looked like a fucking rock star. And I was like, god damn, like that's who my mom actually was. So it's like, that is the person that hundreds of people showed up to a funeral for. It was her.
Not the version.
It wasn't the person that I thought I knew. It was that girl. That's the one who made this massive impact on all these people's lives, that hundreds of people are showing up and crying about how fucking beautiful of a person she was. And I'm sitting there like, what the fuck are you talking about? Right? It was her. I only had memories of the person she became after. And then I realized that I am slowly becoming the person that she ended up becoming after. And that fucking terrified me. And then that was like, okay, well, if I'm doing all of this shit in work or in life, and it's feeling right now like it's not really what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. Well, if I know where that leads, I can't keep going down that route. Right? Like, I can't keep going down the route of, I'm just going to keep doing more for this. And I'm going to stay in this thing that isn't really fully fulfilling me, or doesn't quite feel right, or doesn't feel like I'm able to give everything I have to it. I can't keep doing more of that when I know how the story ends. So that's when it kind of really hit me after that 5 Cent City performance, that I was like, I have to find a way to stop doing what I'm doing right now, because I know where the road leads. It does not go to a very nice place. Right, so that was like a huge wake-up call.
No matter how many people care, no matter you packed the funeral home, but
packed it.
That's
packed.
crazy.
They had never seen anything like it, and I was like, yeah.
Oh, goodness.
So then it was okay, well, do I want to end up being the guy that has a really packed funeral, but died at 45?
Yeah.
Because
Odds
I
are
fucking,
no.
you know,
Yeah.
I was like, I don't,
Doesn't
I
sell
don't
me.
want to, I don't want to have that same ending.
No.
But it was a fucking slap in the face when I was like, oh shit, that's who my mom used to be.
Yeah.
I used to be like that. And now that's who I remember my mom to be, and that's where I'm on my way to now.
Right.
And yeah, that shit fucking, that was a kick in the balls, man. That was a huge kick in the balls.
Jeez, eh?
And that is when the realization really started to kind of swirl around the head, where it was like, okay, I got to find a different way to move, right? Because this is not going to work for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks, Mom. Yes. Thanks for the lesson. Yeah, cause
Yeah. No kidding. Once you, oh wow, jeez, man, yeah, that's a lot.
yeah, man,
That's
that
a
was
lot. That's huge. Did you?
that was a rough night.
Yeah.
That was a rough night, but
Yeah.
very, very proud I did it and happy I went through it,
Yeah, for
because
for sure.
it absolutely, well, it lit up something in my brain that essentially went like, okay, I absolutely cannot continue down that path,
Yeah.
because I know where it's going to go now.
Jeez.
Because if I am now realizing that I'm basically the same person my mom was, and I'm also now realizing that I'm doing the exact shit that led to her ending her life,
Yeah,
gotta
all
switch
bets
it.
are off. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't. Right? Gotta
Right.
switch it.
So now, once you had kind of gone through that and you made those decisions, then moving forward, did you just kind of like start picking away at things you wanted to do?
Yeah,
that the-
kind
that
of.
the idea?
And honestly, like, kind of still at that point now, where, you know, obviously, like, I still have a career and a job that
Oh, for sure.
I still absolutely love doing. But there's a huge part of my life that from the time I was 20, after my mom passed away, that I kind of just tucked aside.
Yeah.
Right? And similar to my mom, like in 1991, when she was dancing and singing and on stage and doing all this shit, to like 95, where she was basically just behind a curtain on a microphone telling other people, like, thanks for coming, right? Like, I was slowly becoming that. Yeah, it was wild, because I had stopped doing so much after she passed away without realizing that I stopped doing it. Because I ended up taking on that role of this caretaker and making sure that no one around me is ever going to feel fucking sad again. No one around me is going to feel depressed, or no one around me is going to be sore or tired or injured or
big
in
undertaking.
any capacity, right?
Yeah.
Not a realistic goal. Okay, right? Like,
Dude.
but that was the thing. It was
Impossible.
it became, you know, my dream ended up going from when I was a kid and I wanted to do all this cool shit and I wanted to do all the, you know, I was involved, I loved music and I loved theater and I loved acting and I loved all this other stuff, and then I loved athletics.
Yeah.
It went from doing all of that to like, I am now here and my only focus in life is making other people feel better.
Yeah.
Right? It was like, ooh.
Yeah.
So now realizing that, okay, well, it was when I really thought about it, was after my mom passed away that I really took on this, like, put on this hat of the
taking
fix
care
it
of
guy.
everybody. Yeah, whether it be at work, personal relationships.
Yeah, exactly. In every the way you do one thing is usually the way you do everything, right?
Yes, sir.
So if that's what I was doing in my personal life, and every relationship I was putting myself into was relationships where I could feel like I was helping them, right? Work, I was putting myself in a constant position where I could feel like I was helping people.
And you don't get enough credit for the work aspect of helping people. And I don't just mean, and I don't, on a lighter note too, I don't just mean that with the people that you have, the clients that come in. I mean specifically as well with the staff you have, and mixing it with all the kids and all the parents and like all the fires that you put out. Like, you're a professional fireman.
Yeah.
Like, you just don't suit up. You just put
without
out
the
fire.
oxygen tank or the cool fucking
exactly,
calendar.
Yeah. Or the
Thanks, man.
sunshine list. But
Oh yeah.
we're trying not to focus on the negatives.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, you
Yeah,
put
none
all
of the perks,
fires- no,
actually. Yeah.
Zero perks.
Like zero fireman
Just
perks.
all the PTSD. Yeah, dealing with young women and like a full staff team of young women, and
a lot
trying to
of
manage
emotions, but yeah.
parents of children that are going crazy and stuff. And I just, man, tip my cap to you for that stuff, because
thank you,
that's
sir.
crazy.
Yeah.
Do you have like leadership tactics when it comes to dealing with whether it be staff conflicts, personal staff conflicts, like just that individuals are having, and then as well ones that you might have with issues that come up with parents and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Is there kind of like a blueprint that you have that you've kind of developed for yourself? Maybe not for everybody could use, but
I don't know if you want to call it like a blueprint, but I think it's things that I definitely always keep in mind.
Nice. Okay.
At the end of the day, everyone has things that they want. Everyone has things that they feel that they need or that they are trying to protect.
Yes.
Right? So even if I'm dealing with somebody and let's say in a certain situation we have a disagreement or they don't like the way something is going, or and this could be like a parent or it could be a kid that I'm coaching, it could be a staff member who's
that's
not feeling
applicable
happy.
for sure.
It's literally any situation.
Amazing.
It could be a friend, right?
Yeah.
If there's a situation where it's like somebody's having a rough go with something, and it feels like what they're doing is either conflicting with what I'm trying to do, or maybe is just I see it as being like counterproductive to what they want.
Yeah.
Right. And now we have a problem. Right. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be a problem where it's like there's yelling and screaming, but it's just like okay, there's a tension here, or there's a discomfort that people are feeling, or that maybe this person is feeling that needs to be addressed because they're not happy.
Yeah.
Right. And one thing I try to keep in mind is okay, if there's a reason why they're feeling like this, right? And I don't have to agree with their response or the way that they're behaving because of that emotion.
Yeah.
But most of the time, if I can operate under the assumption that you are trying to do what you think is best for you and your family, or what you think is fair for you and your family, I need to try to understand what that thing is. And what is the motivation behind you feeling a certain type of way, right? Where it's like if you're unhappy or you're not feeling satisfied or whatever it is, right? Because as a leader, essentially, it's not my job as a leader to tell somebody what to do.
Right. No.
My job as a leader is to know what it is that you are really going after, and then if those things align with where I am trying to go and the direction that I'm trying to take, and in work it would be, do your goals line up with my goals? And if they do, my job as the leader is to try to give you everything that you need to be able to be as successful at your role as you can.
Amazing. Yeah.
Because that's how it's ultimately going to end up helping me. Because if I need somebody who's really good in this specific role, and your goal is to become really good at that specific role, that's somebody I can work with forever, because now I know exactly here's what I need to keep giving you and what I need to keep reminding you you are working towards.
Oh, interesting.
Because now we both end up happy.
Yeah.
And then if something happens where they're not able to feel like they're getting where they need to get with it, or maybe it's not fast enough, or maybe they're just, they feel like they're taking a turn away from that. Well, now at least I have a reference point where it's like, okay, well, is this still what we're going after?
Yeah.
So do our goals still line up? Right?
Sense,
and if they don't line up, okay, well, now we got to figure out what the intentions on both sides are, right? And that doesn't have to be a negative thing.
No.
Sometimes it just means that if somebody wants something different,
Yeah.
it's okay for me to bow out and be like, you know what, that is not something that I am willing or able to offer you at the moment, or maybe ever, but here's where you might be able to be more successful with it. Patty, our great friend Patty, we know what his goals are.
Guy. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, my job for him, if I'm trying to be a good leader with him, I don't need to sit and yell and scream at him to be motivated.
No,
or
it's
to
not the goal.
it's not the goal. I
nowhere.
also don't need to sit there and try to tell him what he should be doing.
Right. He knows.
My job is to listen to what it is that his real goals are, question him if I start to think that he's starting to kind of bullshit himself, or he's starting to veer off.
Yeah.
And it's not that people can't change their mind.
No.
But it's, if you're telling me one thing, or if you stated to me in confidence that this is what your intentions are and this is what your goals are, right? Well, if I see you steering away from that, it's my job as a good leader to try to question why you're going that way, and to try to help steer you back in the right direction, or to try to figure out, like, have you really changed where your destination is? And that's okay too, and that happens too. Like, if you've actually changed your mind, or if you've made a realization that you want to prioritize other things, or you've made the realization that you have other things that are more important to you,
For sure.
great.
Yeah.
But it's not my responsibility to tell you what you should want for your life.
No, you're
And it's
right.
also not my responsibility to tell you that you're wrong for wanting something for your life, right? It's not the goal. So for Patty, is like with the things that he's trying to accomplish as an athlete, My job as like a coach or a leader for him is to constantly be a support and a reminder if you're still staying the course.
Right.
Because if you start falling off your diet or if you are skipping training, I'm going to question if you really want the thing that you told me you wanted. Not because I'm mad at you, but because I want my good friend to be as happy and successful as he could possibly be.
Yeah,
and if I see him
sure.
doing something that is steering away from that, out of love, I'm going to call him on it because I want him to be successful and happy.
Right.
So if you're acting or behaving in a way that is contradictory to what you're telling me your goals are, I'm going to check you. And I'm going to check you because I love you and I want to make sure that you're good.
See what's going on.
I'm not trying to do it because I'm trying to be egotistical or because I'm trying to start a conflict or because I'm trying to start some shit or maybe because I think what you're doing is wrong.
Right.
I'm there to be like, hey, are we sure we're still heading in the same direction?
Yeah.
Or did we change where we're trying to go? And if we did, are we really sure that that's where we want to go? And if it is, great. And if it's not, cool. Then here, what do you need from me so that we can get you back there, right? Because what's the benefit in a friendship? Let's say is, well, I don't want my friend to be miserable and bitter and then doing shit in his life that is gonna put him in a bad situation.
Right.
I want my friends to be I want my friends to be winning.
Hell yeah.
Right?
Of course.
So as a good friend, if you're doing shit that isn't gonna make you win in the ways you want to win, it is my job to fucking tell you.
Hell yeah,
right?
absolutely. You couldn't be. It'd be you being a bad friend if you weren't able to do that.
That's the way I see it, and I think that's the same in any kind of leadership role. Is like that's really my job. Is I am trying to understand what it is that you are trying to accomplish, what it is that your real goals are in your life or in your career or in a certain situation, and then try to find a way to navigate it where we can both either end up getting closer to where we want to be, or we can get clarity where, hey, you know what, we just want different things.
Yeah.
And then that way, if there is, if there needs to be some distance, it's not made with resentment or bitterness. It's made with like, oh, hey, we just don't want the same shit.
No.
And you're now way happier because you get to do something that you want to be doing that's more in line with what you want. And I get to do something that's more in line with what I want. And now neither of us is feeling drained by having to try to keep up something where we're both trying to force the other person to want or behave in a way that
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It's never going to work. And if it does work, it only lasts a little bit. Right. And then it eventually blows up. So yeah, I think that'd be the big thing. And again, it's being a leader is hard. Yeah. It's something like it's definitely a skill you have to always keep up with, right? You can get rusty. Yeah. And if you get rusty, it usually doesn't end well.
No.
Right? And that's why it's good for me, to surround myself with other people and other, friends or colleagues that will do the same to me.
For sure.
Where I don't want to be the leader in every situation.
Right.
Because I am not equipped to handle every situation perfectly. But I hope that I'm around people that are. And if they're in those situations, or if in a certain situation somebody is better equipped to be a leader, I need to learn that it's like my job now to take a back seat and listen and trust that they're going to kind of guide us in the right direction. Right? I can question things.
For sure, yeah.
But if somebody's in authority, it's, okay, well, what can I learn from this? Right? Not, let's try to push back because my pride or my ego might be shot that I'm not the head honcho, I'm not the boss in this situation, or maybe they're not listening to me. It's like, well, maybe there's a reason they're not listening to me, and maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe. Right? And if I am, I might be able to learn. But if I'm really not feeling like I am, okay, well, now let's have a civil conversation about it and try to figure out where I'm making my mistake or if there's an oversight. Right?
It must be nice though, right? Once you've if you're always in that role that people need to look up to and get the advice from or get their problem solved from, and stay the course of action. It must be nice though at times to be able to kind of be on the flip side of that and
fantastic.
Actually learn things
from
other people.
Oh yeah.
And develop the skill.
Well, especially because I did it for so long where it was every day was just putting out fires, right? And I put myself in that situation. Dude, sometimes it's just sometimes I just don't want to have to deal with somebody else's problems. Yeah. So if I can be around other people that are just as capable or even more capable of handling a certain situation, it's like now, previously there was probably some ego attached where I didn't like that and I would take it as a shot against me where it's I'm not good enough, so I need to learn more, I need to get better. Now it's like, oh man, this is fucking great. I get to be an assistant. right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think that's also part of being a good leader is also being able to understand when it's time to kind of take a step back and
Right.
listen or learn or maybe
for sure.
you know, be there to help, not necessarily
Yeah.
lead in every situation, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, that comes with time. That comes with practice. And I'm also not saying I'm perfect at knowing when those times are happening, but I'm definitely getting better with it, and it's going to keep getting
Yeah.
better because it's something I'm going to keep working on, right?
Right. Do you, in regards to the subject of mental health and the broad stroke that it is, there's something that happened this week, and it kind of forced me to realize something. I'm curious what your 5 cents is on this.
Well done.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So, basically, I found that there was a situation. I'm not going to say kind of I can't really say where, I can't really say who, but basically this woman had 5 people living in a 3-bedroom.
Okay.
And one of her daughters is like has a handicap issue, and then a couple other and then her granddaughters were just like home doing nothing on TV when we went in. So my supervisor and I walked in, and we were basically just like checking for bugs, but we were looking around also to see if like what type of shape it was in, like if it was meant for, because she has a bunch of people living there.
Yeah.
So we're like, yeah, it's not
crowded.
really, it's not really safe. Like you can't really have a bed, like a giant queen size bed, in front of your exit door, like in front of your patio door. Like you can't leave. And because we're just thinking fire, right?
Yeah.
There was one bedroom that wasn't being used as a bedroom. It was just all storage totes and closet stuff and armoires and you name it.
Yeah.
Another bedroom, all the wall where the window is, boarded up with, same thing, totes, armoires, you name it, furniture. And then there was a bed in there. And then the other room, same idea. So we're like, okay, well, where did the people sleep if your master bedroom is packed to the gills? You can't exit any of the windows up here. Oh, I'll sleep on the main floor. Like, on what? Oh, beds and couches. Okay, well, they're clearly in front of the door, so you can't leave. And walking down the stairs, there's a couple big things on the stairs, so it's like you can't grab the railing. And I was having trouble, like, awkwardly moving to get downstairs.
Not a lot of space.
No, and if I'm struggling, chances are anybody, like kids or, like, older people with kind of physical disabilities aren't going to have a good time, right?
Yeah.
So, anyways... We go and we're trying to give her solutions. And as you know from your vast years of experiences...
People don't always want solutions.
They don't always want solutions. So we're kind of suggesting certain things like, there's like... And we were saying like there's certain funds in the city has, like random names that you can think of. They have funds that if you apply, each person in the house could apply and get X amount of money. That's just in reserves, which is crazy, right? They get in reserve cash that can go to... what's it called? Go to what they could use for storage off property. So there's like, well, we can't afford it. And we're like, okay, well, there's programs that literally will give you money tax-free that you can use to spend on storage. Oh, well, I don't, blah, 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 blah. Okay.
So it's like the excuses.
Exactly. And it's like, well, where can I put this? And we're like, put it on this. Well, I have a lot of plants on the back of my patio. And we're like, okay, well, put a shed there. Well, if I put a shed there, I'm going to have to get rid of my plants. And we're like, but you're going to get evicted if you don't make this a livable space, man. Like, you're missing the point. And so all that was happening. And then we sit outside and we're like having the discussion. We're going back and forth. We go to the office. We're having another discussion. And it's crazy to me, the flip-flop, dude. Because I meet people that have anxiety. Like, that's just, they have it.
Yeah.
They have their mental health issues, and I wouldn't say I have anxiety, but I've felt the feeling of being very anxious, right? Usually my situation's a bit more, I think, threatening.
Strangling involved.
Yeah. Might get broken in front of like hundreds of people, but that's my own issue.
It's a different kind of anxiety.
Different kind of anxiety, a bit extreme, but that's how we do it, right? And so I remember we were listening to the person, and the reasons and the things that they were saying were just bonkers to me. Like, it was like, I try to do right. It was, I don't like to gossip, but there's a lot of racism around here, but like, I don't know why I'm experiencing the racism when insert her example of them being racist. So it's like we got all these things that they're now Like they're saying, oh,
Pointing to,
yeah, like
yeah.
I'm not doing this, but, and then they'll proceed to give examples of them, or like they'll be racist, but say that there's a lot of racism going around. It's like,
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
the problem.
Yeah.
But as soon, and you're like, they're like, I tried, back in our day, it was this, it was that, and we're like, you're on their side, and the moment you like push back a little on something or disagree or like say that, hey, like I appreciate what you're doing, they're like, yeah, I'm just trying to work hard, trying to do right, I got anxiety, I'm getting older. We're like, yeah, it's tough, but you got to move this out of the way, or else, you have a month to clear the space out. And they're like, oh, well, I got, all these issues, I can't. I'm like, man. So having kind of sat on it for a bit, I wanted to bring this to you. It was weird. I felt, looking back on it, like every single person that has these anxiety or lives with this thing or has these mental health issues, and they're taking the medication, right? Mm-hmm. Agree or disagree on a separate thing. But the thing I found with them was they kind of just choose to deal with it. Like that's their suffering, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like everybody who has those issues, they always have anxiety. They always have, but they're always a victim to their circumstances.
Yes.
That's what it is. It was like, that's the commonality. I was like, why does it always feel like, what is it with every single person? And it's like, oh, but when they have a feeling of anxiety or they face like the anxious feelings inside them, instead of choosing to rise above and like force themselves to work a bit harder just to overcome, just to get over the top of the mountain, instead they're just going to keep struggling and sit halfway up.
Yeah.
So they're in that
there's
puddle,
comfort
like,
in it, right?
yeah, man.
Right.
It's like we each have our struggle.
Yeah.
Right. We all have our separate ones. So it's like, why? I was like, why in the hell I was like, how can people live like that? So it's like they were going through that, and then they're like, I'm like, I would rather deal with my hard on paper or your hard on paper seems way worse than like their hard. Like if you switched,
like you're saying, like
roles
if you,
with them,
like if you were in that position, you would be doing all of this.
All
other
those
shit.
things would not be an issue, right? And you could start in that same scenario just with your own mindset shift. Mm-hmm. And it was crazy to me because I was like, how do people make that shift? Like, do they just get too comfortable, or how do they get out of that like victim switch?
Yeah.
Because it's, oh, I have anxiety, I'm gonna lose, and they just choose to defeat it. Whereas like we choose to confront ours, whatever that might be, right? Whether it be physical, emotional, mental, whatever it might be, right?
Yeah.
It's very, very tricky for me to. I've been trying to understand this concept for a long
time. And I know that
time.
we've talked about it before, where you you've had a hard time trying to empathize with certain people when you're like, especially you, it's like you're also a very practical guy.
Yeah.
Where you see a problem, there's a solution,
and there should be a solution.
So
it's like,
like,
oh, some don't have
execute.
There should be
like,
a freaking solution to it.
And that's
It
also kind of goes really well, which is it makes sense that you love the sport that you love so much. It's like, if you're stuck in a certain position in jiu-jitsu that is not good, there is a skill or a technique that you can use to get out of it.
Yep.
If you got caught in it and you tapped, or you ended up losing because of it,
Yep.
you know that you can go back to the drawing board and find a solution for that problem next time you face it, right?
Yeah, it's very practical.
That's progress. And that's...
But it's applicable to life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. I found,
It's weird.
kind of like how we talked is, you know how the way you do one thing is kind of the way you do everything.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But what's interesting is skill doesn't work like that, because skill is not kind of multi-dimensional, where you can't just develop a skill in one aspect of your life and then also expect it to bleed in to every other.
It's not transferable.
Yeah,
Right.
it doesn't directly translate.
Right.
And I think that, to put it very, very simply, is like, if somebody gets really good at the skill of being a victim in one aspect of their life, whether it's taught when they were young or certain circumstances
They've seen it.
maybe
whatever
they just,
it is.
whatever it is that there's like, you've developed this ability to make yourself a victim,
Right.
right? And not necessarily on purpose, not because it was your fault.
Yeah.
And sometimes it could have been a completely terrible situation that you had absolutely no control over.
Yeah.
But you learned to make yourself a victim of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That skill will end up bleeding into every other aspect of your life.
Yeah, that
right?
one
or
does.
that ability to play this role of the victim will bleed
Yeah.
into everything else, and then you will slowly start doing everything in your life,
Yeah.
or start looking at everything as like, I'm this victim.
It's everybody else is the problem.
Yeah, but then even if
yeah,
you're
it's weird.
really good at like, I'm really good at fucking chemistry, or I'm good at math, or I'm
Yeah.
a good trainer, or I'm a good this, or I'm a good that. If you develop that habit or that skill of I'm a victim, and I shouldn't
Yeah.
even say a skill, but it's this story of like I'm a victim. Those skills that you have it doesn't matter how good of a personal trainer you are.
Yeah.
If you start to develop the habit and the story of you're a victim, no amount of personal training ability is going to help you overcome that.
And it's when you get to that roadblock.
Yeah.
Because it might be fine now, but when there's
Yes.
a roadblock, what's your loop?
What do you default to?
Yeah,
and
man.
that's when habit and that's when that story that people
Yeah.
tell themselves kind of comes back, right?
Right.
So yeah, like the way
Interesting.
you do one thing is the way you do everything.
Yes.
But you
I love
can't
it.
just be good at one thing and expect to be able to sit on that to carry you through every other problem,
Interesting.
right?
Yeah.
And
Wild.
I do think that a lot of situations, or a lot of times when people are dealing with an anxiety or a depression or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
right? There's always an element of that, whether it's on purpose or they're even aware of it.
Yeah.
There's going to be some kind or some form of victimhood. And victimhood is essentially, if we want to kind of break it down, if you feel like a victim, it really just means that you feel helpless or hopeless in a certain situation because you don't have the power to be able to get yourself out of it. That's what a victim is,
Right.
right? Because
Yeah. Fair.
if we take the analogy of like, the victim is somebody that a villain shits on, and the hero is somebody who shits on the villain for doing that thing.
Right.
The only difference between the victim
Yeah.
and the hero
Right.
is that they both got hit with the same shit. The hero is the one who pushed back on it, right?
Yeah.
The villain is the one who's doing the bad thing,
But
or
the victims
evil
tend
thing.
to make others, like their situation,
Exactly.
because they need a villain
They
without.
need, You can't be a victim if you don't have a villain.
And that
what
could be anything,
happens-
yeah.
And unfortunately, what happens is when somebody's being a victim is they're always waiting for a hero to show up. They're waiting for somebody or something to come in and save the day for them. And that's why a lot of times when you hear these stories, and like you said, like people are kind of, they're playing the victim, or they've built this story where nothing they do, so again, there's that hopelessness, that helplessness,
Yeah.
nothing they do is going to be able to be powerful enough to get them out of this situation that they are in.
No.
And it comes out in the form of these stories of like, well, I can't do that because of this, and then I can't do that because of this.
Yeah.
And even if there is some truths in it, they will expand and blow up those truths because it fits that story more, because they're still waiting for some force, some external force to come in
Crazy.
and fix the problem, right?
Yeah.
And the issue that I see a lot of times is, if you are somebody who is prone to dealing with anxiety or depression or whatever, and I am speaking from experience with myself too. It's
Yep.
the same thing we just talked about with my mom. It's like, throughout all of those years, the reality is like me being busy trying to help other people and doing all the stuff that we already talked about is
Yep.
like, the whole time I was really just sitting around waiting for somebody to tell me that I could do something better with my life. Right?
Yeah.
Not on purpose, not because anyone told me or because I even consciously thought of that, but I was always sitting waiting for the day where somebody could come and just save me. But the problem with that is that even if somebody is lucky enough to have a hero come into their life and save the day from the villain, that hero is going to leave.
Yeah, eventually.
And you
for sure.
still feel just as helpless and hopeless. Right?
Yeah.
And that's when you'll see things where something good will happen to someone. I'm sure you've met people or known people
Yeah.
that you love where they'll have this victim mentality and then things start looking up for them.
Yeah.
And it's like things are going better. But then the story ends up becoming, yeah, I'm doing better, but it's only because this happened. And, well, I'm making more money now, but it's only because this person lost their job. Oh, I'm feeling better now, or I lost weight now, but it's only because I'm on Ozempic. It's right. You have all these different things where, so even
Yeah.
when they find success, they are still convincing themselves that it is not because of their power.
You made the choice to do it.
They're still giving credit to this invisible hero, right? And then once that hero leaves, you are left with the same victim who's like, you're just as vulnerable from the next villain or the same villain to come back because you haven't done anything, or you're under the impression, just like I was under the impression of like the perception of who my mom was.
Yeah.
They're under this perception that they are not capable of getting out of that situation,
Right.
or of learning how to get out of it. Right? There's this helplessness and hopelessness that is like. I don't think you could ever find me an example of somebody who is severely depressed or severely anxious, who has a lot of hope and faith that things are going to go well. It doesn't happen. It doesn't exist, right? It just doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
But you have people that can be in that kind of state where they feel hopeful that things can stay the same. Or they have faith that things aren't necessarily going to get worse.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily have faith that they can get out of it or they can stay out of it. And that's the other thing too, right? So you have people that are in these situations. It's like, even if you believe that you can get out of it, if you don't believe that you can stay out of it, why would you do it?
Yeah. That's good. Yeah.
Why would you put all this hard work to find all these great solutions to these problems if you really think that once you do it all, you will end up right back where you started?
Right.
That's hopelessness.
Yeah.
Like, that's what that is why even start?
Right.
There is no point. And I think that's one of those things where, for me, if I was trying to, if it's somebody that I care about that I'm trying to help, or who's struggling or having a hard time, is where in their life are they feeling powerless?
Right.
Right? And then if we can figure that out, at least it gives us some kind of direction.
Yeah.
Right? Why are you feeling powerless? And if we really break it down, if we really think about it, are you actually as powerless as you've led yourself to believe in a certain situation?
Yeah.
Which again that's why it's such a difficult conversation, because every story is so individualized and so special to that one person.
Right.
That's why we don't have a one
size fits all solution. Yeah.
There's fucking hundreds of different types of therapies.
You don't understand what I'm going through.
Hundreds, yeah. There's hundreds of different types of physios, of chiros, and that's just like on the physical aspect of things, but even emotional. Like, how many different types of psychotherapists are there?
Oh, countless.
Countless. Like,
I've had 3 on the show.
Right,
like come on.
100%. Like, there are so many different ways. And that's a good thing, because it offers people different types of solutions to problems. Man. And hopefully the idea is one of those solutions seems to give somebody more hope than another. So it's a good thing that you have that variety. But what are somebody's odds of finding the 1 in a million solution that gives them hope?
Very slim.
It's slim, right? It's very, very fucking slim. And that's why I think a lot of people never end up finding it.
Right.
And they end up in these situations where, if you don't even think that there's an answer out there, you're not going to go looking for it.
No.
Right? Like, you're just not. If I didn't think that I could ever get in shape, why would I have started training? I wouldn't have.
No.
Right? So even though I started working out and I started training purely as a form of insecurity. It was purely just because I wanted to try to be better than what I currently was, because I didn't feel like it was enough.
Right.
Right? Which is a separate conversation on whether or not that's good or not. But I didn't feel like I was enough, so I want to do more.
Yeah.
Right? Well, even with that, I was like, at least I felt that if I did something, it would get better. Right? There was at least hope. Like, it was at least like, like, there's a path. Like, it looks hard and it looks difficult, and I don't really know if I'm going the right way.
No.
But I've heard there's a way. Right? So I've heard some people get there, so let's fucking shoot for it. Right? Whereas, like, the situation with my mom, to me, doing what I was doing, that ended up feeling hopeless. That ended up feeling like I know for a fact that if I continue down this path, I will end up like that.
Right.
Which is also why it didn't feel like there was a choice. It was, I am either going to end up killing myself, or I need to make changes.
Hell yeah.
So, I believe, through experience, that by doing difficult things, I can create changes in my life. There was no option left. It was end up dying, which you are now much closer to
Yeah,
than
you're on the
you
track.
thought you were,
Yeah.
which is not a fun realization, right? Okay, so do that. It's that, or do something about it. It's like,
Yeah.
oh fuck, that's a no-brainer. I'm gonna do something about it, right?
Right.
And I do think that there's a lot of people that unfortunately are stuck in these situations where it's just comfortable enough where they don't feel like they're gonna die. And even sometimes the really sad part is when you know, or when you meet people that do know they're gonna die and still don't feel like it's worth trying. That's a really hopeless
That's a
place
tough
to
one.
be. And that's the people that are the hardest to ever try to help or to
Yeah.
ever, get out.
Yeah.
Because if you don't think you're important enough, or that there's even a chance that you could live a life that you want to live, or
Yeah.
that is worth living, why would you go for it?
Yeah.
That's a fucking terrible place to be. And I know people who have been in that situation,
Yeah.
and I know I've been in that situation, and it's like, that's why it sucks, man. And I think, that's partially why I think I can connect with certain people, because there isn't a judgment.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that I have to accept your bullshit. Just because I can understand the story you're saying, and I can relate, and I can empathize with it,
Right.
doesn't mean I have to agree with it. Right?
That's
And
a big one.
not everyone likes that.
Right. Yeah. It's tough for me to look and see people that go through stuff like that and not. There's a nice quote, and I'm pretty sure it goes like, if you think it's simple, right? It's if you think you can, you're right, and if you think you can't, you're also right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like,
Very fair.
I think I'm gonna die. I think I won't get out. My depression will come back. I'm like, well, you're right.
So then why even try?
Yeah. So we're trying. Well, don't.
Yeah.
It's like it's like my brain always defaults to the dismissive side of it, but then lately I've put in a lot of work trying to understand and like spend time understanding like the ability to empathize with people on that and the empathy side of it. I'm fortunate enough to not have. I've had a lot of crazy experiences, and whether it be people die around me or gun to head or of like facing death with certain things, or having like very close family members die back to back and stuff like that. Like, I'm fortunate enough that I've never felt like it was a direct. I never went through what Michael went through. Both scenarios with his brother, or with his own issues, or with his own parents' situations and stuff like that, and even stuff that's unrelated to Michael that his parents have gone through that they shared when we were up in Hamilton, and the stuff that you've gone through, or family of yours has gone through, friends of yours have gone through. I've never had like a close parent or a parent pass away, and then all these things like go through all that at a young age. I was fortunate enough that those things didn't quite happen, but that didn't. I think that is, to your point, the key that's made you have such a good ability to understand and connect with people. Because I think I do a good job. I shouldn't say good enough job, but a good job of it. But then I see you talk to people and the way you articulate your understanding of, I'm like, oh, this person's reading my mind. Jesus. Whereas I'm like, oh, I can understand where they're at with this. Whereas I feel I'm like, this person's in the person's brain. They've gotten to that level of understanding that I'm trying to achieve and like strive for. So it's been really interesting to see my progression, and talking to a few people as well as you about it too. And it's trying to not be so dismissive with the people that I'm close to already. Right.
Yeah. And I
That's
think
been my battle.
to that too, like you said, I think what you said was very smart, because it's like the patience part. Because a lot of times, if we're talking to somebody that you don't agree with the way they're behaving or the way that they're doing shit, right?
Yeah.
Very often, most people they will lose patience and then just try to be like, get the fuck away from me, because this is pissing me off.
Figure it out.
Right?
Just completely dismiss it.
And that happens still to everyone. I think something that I try to do is, if something really starts to bother me, or if like somebody's saying or doing something and it really starts to fucking piss me off, it's like, there's a reason that this is upsetting me so much, right? Like, and sometimes it's like, are they striking something that maybe kind of conflicts with maybe a belief that I have, and it really like it upsets me
Sometimes
on like
it
a
is
moral
that,
stand where you're like,
yeah.
no, you're fucking wrong, and I
Yeah.
know you're wrong because I went through all these experiences, and all those experiences have taught me to not believe or not agree with
Yeah.
what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So you could have that, or you could have this like lack of patience where it's like maybe what they're saying is like actually kind of true, and now it's really conflicting with, oh, maybe my story that I'm telling myself or that I've convinced myself is like might not work.
My
Like, with
reality,
my mom, right?
the perception
My
of what-
reality and my perception of my mom, and then all these people coming in and telling me who she
It
was.
conflicts
and I'm
with
like,
your reality.
fuck
Yeah,
you.
that's tough.
You're wrong. I don't agree because this is the way I see things, and
Yeah.
you're giving me information that completely contradicts that. Like that can be frustrating. So then
Yeah.
we lose patience
Very.
because we don't really want to dig into why it might be bothering us so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's always a reason because I know, like even with
Yeah.
you, it's like day to day, you might deal with some people that other people, let's say, might fucking take them over the edge, but you have enough control and understanding for yourself and
Yeah.
enough empathy and patience where even if it's something you want to work on, you're not blowing a gasket anytime somebody fucking
Oh, God, no.
says or does the slightest thing to you,
Never, no.
and it ruins your whole day.
Yeah, you should
right?
never.
You operate at a pretty cool level-headed, day to day.
Yeah.
So if that's where you operate at, and you know that you have this ability and a really good ability of being able to kind of
It's like mitigated. a bit,
mitigate,
Yeah.
right? Well, if something is really getting to you and it really starts to kind of rile you up, there's a reason that it's really
Yeah,
trying to
we
rile
raise
you
the
up.
flag. Why?
Yeah, because if you're really good at dealing and coping with these things and processing them and then
Right.
and then kind of being able to move on, well, if this is giving you a hard time, it's because it's challenging you.
Yeah.
It's no different than
Interesting.
if you know that you can curl fucking 25 pounds
Yeah.
and you walk into a gym and you go to curl at 25 pounds and you can't do it, it would make sense that you're like, what the fuck is going on? And it's like, well, maybe you didn't pick up the 25. Maybe you picked up a 35. So you need to realize that this might be a bigger challenge than you're used
I
to,
get it.
which is
Yeah.
why you're not able to do it as easily as you always thought. And now you're getting upset because
Yeah.
in your head, you're looking at it like this is supposed to just be 25 pounds. I know I can lift this.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's not.
No, that
Right.
makes sense. Yeah.
So if you're dealing with somebody and they seem to really be getting under your skin, it's like, oh, why? Why is this particular incident so like kind of triggering for you?
Yeah.
If you know that you're so good at other shit. No, dude, don't get me wrong. I know some people, they can't handle any shit. All right, like the slightest inconvenience, and it's like, "Ugh." I would be having a different conversation with that person if you have no ability to let anything go at all.
Yeah.
Like you need to learn empathy in its most basic form,
Yeah.
right? Like just being able to understand or see anything from somebody else's perspective might be what you're dealing.
Right.
Might be the better lesson for you. But for somebody like you, or well, I like to think like
Yeah.
most people kind of find themselves in a state where they feel probably fairly level-headed or cool-headed throughout the day.
Yeah, pretty much.
Maybe they're not living with like high
90% of the
anxiety
time, I'd
or
say.
they're right like they're not dealing or living in this constant state of fear. The average person, let's say, may, and to your credit, like you've probably done more work than 90% of the population
Yeah.
by actually going out and
I'd say
the
I'm
amount
good.
of people you've
Yeah.
talked to about these things and information and books that you've read or
Yeah.
research that you've done
Tons,
is
yeah.
I would say you're already probably further ahead than most people are when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to just being able to develop the skill of empathy or understanding,
Yeah.
right? The next thing for you might not necessarily be trying to understand, okay, well, how can I be empathetic?
Right.
I think you know how to be empathetic.
Right.
It's maybe trying to understand, okay, if I know that I can be empathetic, but I'm having a really hard time with this particular person or in this particular issue, what is it reflecting about me that I clearly still have some kind of
Like
resentment or bitterness
insecurity,
or maybe an
bitterness,
insecurity
yeah, you never know.
or maybe there's like something has happened in the past or
Oh,
some kind
that's
of trauma
interesting.
where it's like, oh shit, like this is something that I still haven't dealt with.
Yeah.
And when this person behaves like this or brings this up, it really triggers this in me and makes it feels like that 35-pound
Yeah.
weight instead of the 25 that I'm used to dealing with.
Why
right?
is it true? Oh.
Right. And then with that, like I said, like the more you can end up reflecting on your shit and why certain things might be able to really piss you off, and then a lot of times you can realize like, oh shit, like maybe it's something that I'm actually really insecure about that I
Yeah.
do, and then when other people do it, it really gets to me. Or maybe it's
Oh.
something that you used to do that you had to work your ass off to try to
Interesting.
overcome or to try to stop doing. So it really bothers you when you see other people that aren't
Yeah.
as far on that journey as you. Right?
Interesting.
So it's like if I'm a really patient person or I think I'm a really empathetic person, but it took a lot of work and I had to go through a lot of shit to get there.
Yeah.
And then I see somebody with no ability to be empathetic.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah. Why don't
Fix
you understand?
it. Do what I did.
Yeah.
Fix it, right? And then you think about it, you're like, oh no, like they're
Mm.
just we're at different parts in the same
Right.
journey. So it's like it's not fair for me to criticize them and judge them because they're not as far along.
No, you're
because
right.
there's probably a lot of aspects in their life that they're further along than I am, or
Yeah.
experiences that they've had that I have. I'm a beginner at.
Right.
So it's like, okay, like doesn't mean I have to like what they're doing, but
Mm-hmm.
at least I can, calm down a little bit and try to understand, okay, what is that you're really trying to accomplish with this?
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when it kind of comes back to the conversation we had about being a leader.
Right.
If I feel that I'm having a conversation with somebody and it's really angering me, I can take the role of a leader to lead this conversation to a relatively better conclusion.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, you don't seem like you have the skills to be able to end this conversation well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to do what I can to lead us there so
Yeah.
that at least we can both go on with our days and not end up feeling like this is going to drag on, or we're going to, the last thing I want is I don't ever want to have an interaction with someone that I spend the next 3 weeks fucking banging my head against the wall. Like, I got better shit to do. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to have to sit here and be like, man, I'm still mad at this person for this conversation. It's like, I got other problems.
Yeah.
I have other things I want to do than to have to worry about this. So it's like,
Right.
okay, well, let's find a way. If I feel like you're incapable of leading us there, I'll take the lead, and let's get us to a point where we have at least
Amazing,
at least
yeah.
an understanding,
Right.
not an agreement, not
Just
not necessarily,
mutual.
but I understand where you're coming from, and I accept that that's just where you're at.
Mm,
And then because I accept that that's where you're at, it makes it a lot easier for me to just be like, cool,
clear. Yeah.
that's just where you're
Clears
at,
you of
and
it.
I want to be over here, so I'm gonna move this way.
Okay. Right on.
So
Interesting. So, kind of to wrap up, you've mentioned it a few times, but I want you to close with, and you can think about whether like quote, statement, you name it, kind of just to wrap up everything we've talked about, maybe points you want to hammer home. But you mentioned a few times, and I want to highlight it if this isn't what you were going to say, but how you do one thing is how you do everything.
yeah, yeah.
So, that's, we've touched on that a few times. I don't know if that's what you're going to echo, but I wanted to make sure it was said again, because I think said 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
I want to make sure
I think there's
it's
a lot of truth to it.
a lot of truth to that, and it's huge.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to it, and sometimes when you really think about it, it can piss you off.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's
Yeah.
it's a good thing to kind of try to keep in mind.
Checks yourself.
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
good.
100%. It's, is this something that if something's bothering me, if you're not getting where you want to be, it's like, have I done this before with
Right.
with other things in my life? Are there other areas in my life that I've
Yeah.
maybe repeated the same habit or the same pattern? It's usually yes.
Yeah.
Like I said, is it a? Do I want to say it's a blanket statement that is applicable to absolutely everything? No, probably not.
really.
But generally speaking, yeah, I think it's a pretty good rule of thumb. So yeah, but the good thing about that is if you believe that that's true, then that means that the better you get at one thing,
Yeah.
the better you can get at everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that you are better at everything else, because like we said, skill doesn't always translate from one to the other just
No.
like that, right?
Yeah, I wish.
But
Sometimes,
if I can
but-
develop this ability to get good at something,
Mm-hmm.
or I can develop this ability to be disciplined, or this ability to be empathetic, or right, whatever it is that you're talking about,
Yeah.
that will start to trickle into everything else that I do.
Oh, I
The
see, yeah.
ability to get there,
Right.
Not necessarily
The development of the
the
process.
end result itself,
Yeah.
right? So
Oh, interesting.
yeah, I think that's probably good, wise words to live by for anyone. I think.
I am really grateful for your time, bro. I fucking love you, dude. And I cannot wait for your tell-all book to come out.
Yeah, it's just gonna
Very
be.
excited. It won't be next week.
We don't know
It
what
won't
it's
be
about
next
yet.
year.
Yeah, we don't
no
know.
idea what's gonna
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of questions all the time for people that I keep pushing tell-all books to, just so that like I have questions prompts that they can
Love
use
it.
to answer to tell their own
Love it.
story. So
Well,
yeah,
if it ever happens, I have my book. You'll be the first one.
Hell yeah.
You'll be the first interview I do.
I'm very excited, dude. Let's go.
Let's go,
Appreciate it,
brother.
dude. That's it.